Hello and welcome to another edition of Press Row on Rivalry Family Media. I'm Todd Robbins. Happy to have you along with us and happy to be joined today by Ashley Green, photographer, photojournalist here in Central Massachusetts, currently working for the Telegram and Gazette. Ashley, I haven't had an opportunity to check Twitter today. That's still an accurate statement, correct?
That is an accurate statement, yes.
Good. I like to hear that, and well-deserved it is. Glad to, we'll get more into that later on, but I'm certainly glad to see that injustice has been righted. I can say it, you don't have to. As we continue through this conversation, of course, of what things have been like, I think Ashley is a fantastic guest to have at this point in time because there's just so much to talk about. She's probably been one of the busiest members of local media during all of what I'm calling this COVID chaos because she's gotten to see everything kind of on the scene, on the front lines as things have changed, and we'll certainly get into that. But Ashley, before I get too much into obviously what's been going on more recently, I want to flash back a little bit. And I know for most people, they may initially recognize your name locally from the Sentinel and Enterprise. Maybe that's where we would say here in North Central where you rose to prominence. But give us a little bit of your background and kind of how you got yourself started in photography and photojournalism.
Sure. So I grew up in Fitchburg, went to Fitchburg High, went to Fitchburg State. So I'm like totally local. And so
aren't we all?
Basically after college, I went for photo, but I really had no idea like what you can actually do with that. I knew I liked taking pictures, but I was like, okay, now what? And so my advisor recommended I check out the Sentinel and Enterprise since I was so local. And so I did my summer internship there for, I think it was like 2 months or something like that at the time. And, learned a ton. Obviously, I knew nothing about like the newspaper industry or journalism at all. And then I kind of lucked out shortly after my internship. There was an opening at the Lowell Sun for a weekend position. And my editor at the time, Charlie St. Amand, he recommended me to Lowell. And I was able to take that part-time position for, I want to say like a little over a year. And then kind of the same thing here. Someone was leaving and a position opened up and I was able to come back to Fitchburg and I was with the Sentinel. I think it was close to 4 years, 3.5, something like that. And then, more recently, I guess in the past 2 years, 2.5, I've been with the Worcester Telegram. So a little further outside my comfort zone of being like close to home, but exploring more and getting used to like more areas around the state and all that. So, yeah.
Certainly a wider range. A lot of, I think, what comes with school and maybe some of those internships that are required as some, part of some media programs, as you mentioned at Fitchburg State, part of it is about figuring out not just what you want, but definitely what you don't want. So there was certainly something about that Sentinel and Enterprise, internship that said photojournalism was a place you wanted to be. What drew you to photojournalism?
I definitely knew so at Fitchburg State, we learned a lot on film and like fine art photography. And I knew that wasn't really like my thing, but like I said, I didn't really know like where you could go from there. And basically once I started at the paper, I was just hooked, like the adrenaline of like breaking news and just telling stories and obviously covering sports. Like I just was hooked like right off the bat. And so it was nice to be able to kind of find what I wanted to do pretty quickly instead of, working my way through it for, like some people do for a little bit longer. So
I'm going to split this next question kind of into two parts. As far as first assignments that you can remember, obviously you got that first part-time job at the Lowell Sun on a weekend. So something there has got to stand out kind of as your first professional assignment you're going out to do. And then obviously we could bring it back a little bit more local to the Sentinel Enterprise. What were those first events for you that stand out in your mind as you were getting started?
Sure. So I remember the first day of my internship, actually, Charlie sent me out. We have these things in journalism called man on the street. And you basically have one set question you ask. You go to, I don't know, maybe a mall or a park or something, and everyone gets the same question. And generally it's a headshot of a person and their answer to the question. I actually think my mom was in the Sentinel when I was younger for one of these like man on the streets. So like I said, I was so shy back then. Like I did not like talking to people. I didn't like approaching strangers, nothing. And he was like, okay, send you to do your first man on the street. And I was like, what is that? And he sent me to, I'm pretty sure it was like the parking lot at the mall. And I don't even remember what the question was. I was so overwhelmed. It took me hours to do what was maybe 20 minutes of work. I just did not want to approach people. I wanted no part of it. So that was definitely like getting your feet wet right away, just being like thrown into it. And yeah, so that was really like stuck out in my mind at the Sentinel. And then I remember the first game I shot, my lens was like on manual focus the whole time. And I was just so stressed and overwhelmed. Like I didn't even realize. And I somehow walked away with like a couple photos in focus by some miracle. But I remember just like being too scared to ask questions of the photographer I was working with. And it was just a lot really fast. And then in Lowell, I learned a lot more about like more long-term journalism, like how it is on a long like course of a year type thing, instead of just like, okay, the summer assignment here, these cute kids playing at a park, because my internship was in the summer. And I remember I had a really big fire one day, and I had plans with my friends that night. And it was the first time I ever had to tell them I'm going to be late for something because of journalism. And now they just know that's how my life works.
All plans are tentative until 30 minutes before when you confirm.
Yep. And so I remember it was my first big fire. It was a big apartment building, and it had like flames just gushing out of the roof. And I remember like just being like, oh man, this is like really fascinating to watch, like the firefighters work and cops on the scene and all of that. And that really like stuck out in my mind as like one of the first big things I feel like I covered. And pretty much just since then it's been chaos. So
I have to imagine, comparing, your three locations in the state that you've covered. I've got to imagine that covering the reach of the Lowell Sun up in the Merrimack Valley to be very similar to your, kind of beat in Worcester covering the Telegram, because it's not just Worcester, it's all of the surrounding suburban communities that go with the large city as well.
Yeah, for sure. I can't even list off like all the towns and high schools we cover, because it's right down to the Connecticut border, up to Fitchburg, up, obviously it's harder to get to all of these areas now, but, up into like Westminster, Ashburnham. So it's all over.
When you think about, obviously, and you've mentioned Charles St. Armand, as kind of a figure certainly in the early part of your career, is there a local figure in particular that really has put a mark on you, not just in helping you maybe for a job, but somebody that maybe has helped you adapt your style some?
Sure. Maybe not my style so much, but when I was an intern, Brett Crawford, he was really a little closer in my age than some of the rest of the staff. And it was really easy to interact with him. And once I got past that first game that I was too scared to ask questions, it was easy to try to learn from him and not feel like I was just some young kid that didn't know anything. And he would take the time to teach me and make sure I was like headed on the right path, and like really got me going. And then it ended up being him who left the Sentinel, and I came back and filled his position. So it was a cool kind of like full circle moment for me, where he kind of taught me things, and then I came back and took over for him. So
that's really a fantastic opportunity. And of course, we mentioned, and I've used the term a few times now, and probably will use it ad nauseum throughout our visit, but the term photojournalism, I think, is a really big distinction. People think camera operator, photographer goes take pictures, that's pretty, but that's not what photojournalism is. There is a real kind of specification to your job. You don't necessarily write the story, as I describe a lot to my radio and TV students. You illustrate the story. Talk about kind of your philosophy when you go out to shoot an event.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things, I'm going to keep coming back to Charlie, because he just, in the couple of years he was with us, it just taught me so much. But he always used to tell the reporters that a photograph was a free advertisement for your story. And I always kind of think of it that way, like, okay, the reporter's telling the story, so how can I show this story so that if someone picks up the paper, they're intrigued by what they see, and they want to see something interesting, want to read the story or click on the slideshow, or read more after one tweet, and find out what it is that I'm showing and why. And it's not just always a photo. It's like there's information that goes behind it, there's a story that goes behind it. So yeah, I really like trying to tell a story, I guess, with our photos instead of just, this pretty sunset or whatever that we do sometimes. Obviously, other times there's stuff that goes a lot more behind the scenes and you're really like learning a lot more about people and what they do.
Well, and the point you make, I think, is really, salient, and people probably do it unconsciously. When you look at a newsstand, if you don't have regular subscription delivery, when you're looking at the papers and you're thinking you want to pick up something to read, if it's not just the local one that you're going to grab, there's probably two things, and history bears this out as well. There's two things that you're looking at. You're either going to look for a large headline that's going to draw your attention, or likely that photo that's above the fold. Those two things have got to be, the thing that draws somebody's attention.
Yeah, for sure. You always want something that's going to grab your attention right away and like draw people in. And especially now, people have such short attention spans. I'm the same way. Like, I want to know what I'm looking at right away, or I want it to make me like ask questions like, what is this thing and why do I want to look further into it, I guess.
When you compare, of course, where you were maybe 10 years ago when you got started versus where we are now with social media and this kind of digital first movement with stories going out there, I think you make another salient point, which is that is what's going to draw people to the story. The headline really kind of gets lost. I feel like when you're just mindlessly scrolling through Twitter or Facebook or pick your favorite, the photo now is going to be the thing that really does tell that story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Twitter compared to like the scheme of history is still relatively new. I made my Twitter during my internship, I think. And it was really just starting to pick up then. And it was nothing, obviously, like it is now, where the news feed is just constantly recycling. So it is, yeah, it's a totally different landscape now, even than when I started in this industry 7-8 years ago. So
we'll return to the concept of philosophy, and we're going to get more in depth into the shooting and maybe take a peek into what's in your bag before this is all over. But we'll get back to that in a little bit, because I want to talk about kind of capturing the world, that has become. As I said off the top, there are very few people that, have been, able to go out into the world and go from the point of shutdown all the way through the events that have happened to this point in time, a couple of months now down the road. When you think about before COVID and kind of where we were in the waning days before that shutdown came in the early teens of March, what was the last memorable event you can remember working before, kind of, we'll say the world changed? We'll call this the before segment of this.
I know, isn't it crazy? It seems like it was like years ago and also yesterday. It's been wild. I don't really remember what the last. Oh, you know what? It was winter playoffs. I shot a basketball semifinal on, I think, a Friday night, a Thursday night, I want to say. And for some reason, I had the following day off. And by the time I came back Friday, Saturday, the tournaments were pushed off. And the kids never got to finish their playoff season. And obviously, we see how that's gone now. And we have no spring seasons, graduation, the rest of the school year, all that. So it was crazy. It really did change that quickly, where we were covering sports like every night. We were fully in it for playoffs. I work a night shift, so a lot of times, especially during playoff season, it just gets crazy. You're at a game every night. If they're close by, you're maybe at 2 games a night, or 1 game early and another game later at night. And yeah, it was the matter of a couple days where everything was just put on hold, and no one knew like if we were going to complete those tournaments or if we were going to come back to them, or what it was. And I actually missed one. I know there was one game played without a crowd that was in our coverage area, and the fans weren't allowed, no students, no, I don't think parents were allowed. And I wasn't on that day for some reason. I want to say it was like one of my days off or something. So I missed that. And I was pretty bummed, because I was like, that's so rare. Like, for high school athletes to be playing in an empty gym with no sound. Like, I just can't even imagine how eerie that must have been on the cusp of like the world changing, and to see like almost overnight how those games and environments like changed.
I have a feeling we're going to have to get used to that potentially coming up in the next few months as well. I like the word eerie, because I think we're going to use it quite often to describe the next handful of months to come as well. But when you obviously were tracking that change, and things went from having tons and tons and tons of things to cover to a lot of press events and a lot of announcements. So certainly your world changed. What was the first one you remember getting assigned to, and obviously what was it and how was it different?
Yeah, I remember just it definitely went from like so much to nothing all at once. And we were just kind of like, okay, there's no sports, there's no school, like what's going to be happening? And at first it seemed like, okay, there's nothing happening. And then also very quickly, it was like, wow, there's so much happening. Like we have to be everywhere. And, the news was just changing so fast. It went from, not really having cases here to then having positive cases in the US and then positive cases in mass. And it just kept, kind of evolving to where we are now. And we didn't know, like, no one knew at that point, am I going to get stopped on the road for driving? Are we going to be allowed out of our houses? Like, be a complete shutdown. And our editor did send out passes for all of us to be printed in our car in case we were stopped, saying that we were members of the media. And, we were obviously exempt from any stay-at-home order or whatever may have come down. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. And there was a Saturday shift. I work on Tuesday through Saturday. So typically on Saturdays, it's pretty quiet. You tend to cover a lot of like sports, family events, stuff like that. And the first Saturday we had a press conference, which now I think I've gone to like, I don't even know how many of them. And Worcester confirmed their first positive case. It was definitely like a little eye-opening because you're like, okay, it's here now. Like we have to figure out how to deal with this going forward. And basically since then we've had a press conference daily with the city. And trying to make that look different every day has been a challenge for sure. And it hasn't been me every day. We've split it amongst the other photographers. I think it tends to fall a little bit more in my shift. So I've ended up there a little more often. But yeah, that first one was pretty eye-opening. Like, okay, this is like the future now, and this is how things are going to start going. And then obviously, I think along the road, some of the announcements, that the DCU Center was going to become a field hospital, that was very like shocking, I think, for Central Mass, especially, and being right in my office and where we park every day. It was, obviously it's all been pretty shocking that life has kind of come to a halt like this. So definitely along the way, there's been a couple moments where you just like, I don't know, you kind of like wake up all of a sudden and you're like, wow, this is really kind of what life is right now. So.
And do you find, of course, I think a lot of times under normal circumstances, people gravitate a little bit to a camera when they see it, hoping to end up in the paper. Do you find now, obviously, because you have to kind of weave your way through the community, do you find people maybe being a little more standoffish to seeing another human being coming somewhere near them, let alone being worried about being captured wearing a mask and somehow being in the newspaper?
Yeah, I mean, even at first, it was like the chase to get the first photo of someone just walking down like Main Street Worcester in a mask was like, it felt so immediate. Like we needed that photo. Like, okay, people in our community are wearing masks now. Like this is a big thing. And now obviously it's, daily life. So photos that mattered so much like 2 or 3 months ago are just not nothing now, obviously, but, we wouldn't just take a photo of anyone walking down Main Street wearing a mask now because it's not as newsworthy, I guess. So over the course of this, it's just changed so much of like what matters the most that day to then some things that just don't. And I think at first, obviously, people were very hesitant to maybe obviously wear the masks in public or whatever. And so then being documented in one was a whole other thing. But a lot of the stuff we've been going to has been assigned. It's been set up in advance. Either my boss or a reporter has set it up and someone knows a photographer is coming. So it's a little less of the going out and finding our own photos, I guess, and kind of convincing people like, hey, I work for the paper. Is it okay if I take your photo? That whole thing. So yeah, it's been a little easier, I guess, in that respect, because most things have been assigned and set up and people know we're coming and they know to be prepared for us.
You mentioned the struggle to make every press conference look a little different or make it look visually interesting in some capacity or another. And I imagine that can be incredibly difficult because if you're used to a beat where you're shooting live action like sports where there's
Yeah.
so much going on, and now it's just one person standing at a podium after another. When you approach an event like that and you know it's going to be something you're going to see frequently, and obviously it's going to be photographed frequently, if not by yourself, but by everybody who's working, in a particular, area, what is it that you can do? How do you make it different or unique?
Yeah, we've definitely been on our toes for just those little moments where something's a little different than the day before. And kind of through this whole process, they've definitely evolved too. At first, we weren't wearing masks to the press conferences. We weren't necessarily spaced apart. We were in a much smaller room at first than we are now. And eventually it evolved to being at City Hall, being in a bigger room, being spread out more. So a couple days there were, the first time that someone wore a mask, or the first day that you caught someone sanitizing their hands when they get to the podium. The first day we noticed name tags on the floor. And so we realized everyone's going to be spread out instead of just, congregated at the podium. Little moments like that. And, there's been some American Sign Language interpreters there through the whole thing because the city also broadcasts it. And Rick Sinclair got an excellent photo of the interpreter kind of making the motion of a mask as I think it was the mayor or the city manager was talking about putting his mask on. So those little moments that you look for that stand out from just, someone at a podium, like saying their little deal for the day.
Absolutely. And of course, I have to imagine in some ways, although you guys are really skilled at being able to capture the moment regardless of your distance, I have to imagine that social distancing and the way that obviously things are being laid out very specifically are going to trap you a little bit. How much of a challenge does it make capturing a moment when you're aiming for it, when you have this little plot of real estate you must stay in?
For sure. It's been weird. I mean, even with business portraits, typically we would set however many people up for a photo outside their business to, illustrate a business story. And now it's kind of like, okay, well, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing to showcase our business. So I'm going to stand over here and he's going to stand over there. And it looks super awkward for a photo, but it's also like, when you look back at all this, that's what it was like. And that's what it's going to be like for however long now. So definitely there's been some weird times where, you just forget, or it's like, okay, well, do I wear my mask for this photo or do I take it off? And it's like, whatever you're comfortable with, I'm going to wear mine to photograph you. If you want to take it off for the photo and I can be distanced away, I'm comfortable with that. Like if you want to wear it for the photo, that's fine too. So it's been a lot of just kind of figuring out that stuff and, everyone's comfort level and our own comfort level and making sure everyone's safe and kind of on the same page.
A movie reference is always a risk, but I'll throw it out there and see if you've seen this one because I think this works for photography. It's the movie Crazy Rich Asians. The guy who only wants optimum angles. Yep. That goes against every instinct of a photographer because it's all about wanting to capture the natural vision. And what you're talking about is basically everyone wanting the optimum angle of perfect social distance, perfect mask, perfect everything. It's pretty much a disaster for a photographer.
Oh yeah, it totally is. It looks so awkward. And, we've had to kind of not stage things, but talk to people in advance. Like, okay, when I come, I'll knock on the door and then you can come out, stuff like that. So it's not your typical journalism where you're catching every moment completely raw because sometimes we just right now, have to make sure everyone's, like I said, safe and comfortable. So
it's not practical in all circumstances. We've talked a little bit about the masks, and of course, so much of what you do in photojournalism is about capturing the moment. Whether it's as you talked about the mask, kind of the sign or something like that, or capturing an emotion. And so much of when we talk about capturing emotions on video or in a digital image comes from here. It's the face, it's the musculature, it's how you translate things. People do unconsciously in their own mind, but they're using your lens as their eye in the photo. A mask takes away about half of those instincts. Does it help to maybe double underline some of the emotion in certain circumstances, or does it again make your job harder in trying to capture the translation because you're losing half of the face in a story?
Yeah, it probably does make it a little harder, to be honest. One of the first Obviously no one can be at hospitals right now for women who are giving birth except for their partner. And there was one day I was waiting outside the DCU center for some other photo that I was trying to catch, and I noticed someone like down the street kind of like holding someone up to a window, and I'm like, what's going on here? And it was the windows where the maternity ward at St. Vincent's are, and it was a sister, her sister's baby through the window, and she had the woman's kids with her. And it was just before the masks, so I was able to get more of that like emotion of the kids like seeing dad through the window and calling dad on the phone so they could talk to him. But since then, you know, I did shoot one other one and everyone was in a mask, and I think it definitely did make the photos a little different because, you know, I went up to them and I was like, I'm worth the paper. I see you're like meeting your family through the window. Do you mind if I take your photo? And it's kind of like, you know, you're talking through your mask and trying to stay back and explaining who you are. And, you know, I'm not just someone on the street taking a picture of this newborn child. So it's a lot. It adds to, you know, the difficulty of our jobs on like a daily basis. So it's been a lot.
But on a full circle moment here in this story, think about where you were. You were afraid to ask a man on the street. Now you're yelling from 6 feet away, trying to introduce yourself. I mean, it's a long way. You've come a long way in a short period of time. You know, many people, we said this off the top as well, you know, can work from home. And in your circumstance, you absolutely cannot. And so you are in the field, you are out there every day, or at least every day that you're assigned, and you're in the community. How has it been? How has it been going out and practicing your job in a place where you have to be on site? You can't take photos from home and send them in and say, hey, look, my new cats, click, put those on the front of the paper.
As one jumps on
cue.
He's like, I'm the old cat, remember me? Yeah, it was a lot, especially at first. You know, we've kind of all gotten used to this, like, I hate to say new normal, but at first it was a lot of anxiety of just feeling germy kind of everywhere you go, you know, not being able to stay home. Everyone who was stuck at home was kind of complaining, like, I want to be out doing things, and I was at work and all my friends are at home. I'm like, I would love to just be on the couch, like. And it was a lot of coming home, disinfecting everything that came out of the house with me, washing my hands, doing all that. And not to say I don't care about it anymore. I, of course, do. But, you know, obviously when now you're doing this every day, it's like, okay, I'm washing my hands, I'm sanitizing, I'm doing the right things, but I'm a little less anxious about it on a daily basis as I was at the beginning. Which might not be a good thing. Maybe I'm, you know, slipping a little bit and not disinfecting my camera a million times during the day. But yeah, it was a lot, especially at first, just being out in the world felt so like unknown. Like you didn't know, you know, what you were going to come home with that day. And it's a lot.
I know being at home, obviously, more often and trying to teach from distance, the thing that has struck me getting to go out during the day is just how empty society felt. And I have to imagine when you were first sent out to start capturing some photos, you know, you talked about that race to get that first photo of A, somebody walking down Main Street, and then B, somebody walking down Main Street wearing a mask. It was a bit like finding a needle in a haystack, slim pickings in the photography world. And I suppose at the same time, interesting artistically, because you got to take a lot of empty world photos, which had to be fascinating to document in a world that's usually hurry up and go.
For sure. You know, obviously Worcester's not super walkable, and anywhere really in Central Mass isn't. So we're not getting those like New York City shockingly empty photos. But you know, there were days where at first, like you'd go out in downtown Worcester and you wouldn't really see anyone. It took a while for sure. Obviously at first, like, everyone had different levels of comfort with all of this, and some people were kind of doing their own thing. And then as more and more people started working from home, you know, you can get around Worcester a lot faster now than you used to be able to, and you're not hitting that 4 or 5 o'clock traffic like you used to. And, you know, it's changed. It's been pretty crazy. And I think now, especially with the warm weather and some people starting to get back to working in their offices, it's picking up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, obviously the toilet paper and the not being able to find anything at long lines at grocery stores, like all of that came with, you know, the story at first was just so much. It was like, what's going on here? Like, just daily life was changed so fast.
How many empty toilet paper pallet shots were there?
We didn't overdo it, surprisingly. I went to Market Basket in Leominster, kind of when the whole like toilet paper shortage started. And I was like in awe that this was going on. And, you know, there were signs up saying that you could only buy so much, but of course there was none even on the shelves to buy. And, you know, food aisles were empty, just everything. You know, people were buying like gallons of water, like full carts of them. And it did feel like, okay, we're at the end of the world here. Like, what's going on? But yeah, we didn't overdo the grocery stores too much. We kept it to a minimum.
No question about that, which plays into our next thought, which is some of the philosophy behind shooting. And of course, as I mentioned, you do play that dual role in your career, photojournalist and also photographer, working the wedding circuit, which I want to talk about in detail in a little bit. But first, when you compare those two jobs, you know, maybe we'll say under normal circumstances for the point of reference on this, shooting a wedding versus shooting for a story, they're seemingly two very different things. And your eye has got to be, you know, slightly different, but maybe there are some similar philosophies. How do your approaches, how are they similar? How are they different?
For sure. Obviously with journalism, you know, you want to catch those raw moments. You don't want scripted things. You want everything to be genuine. You know, you're always trying to catch those, you know, offhand moments, instead of staged planned things. Obviously with weddings, you know, you have those posed family photos and all that important stuff, you know, the photo that grandma wants to hang up on the wall, all that important like posed stuff. But I do think I take some of my journalism style into my wedding photography and my separate business because I want to capture, you know, raw moments. I like to kind of hide back from the scene a little and kind of see what people are doing and just catch those moments that, you know, maybe people won't think I got a photo of that thing, but then later they see that it's in their gallery and they didn't even realize I was there taking the photo. So yeah, stuff like that. I try to take some of what I know from journalism into my wedding photography style.
Do you have a preference? You know, I ask radio and TV announcers all the time whether you like radio or television better. Do you have a preference? Do you like the wedding circuit more maybe than the photojournalism piece or vice versa?
I don't think I could pick just one, and that's why I do both. They're so different. I mean, it's super fun to go to weddings every weekend and meet new couples and families and their kids, and it's really fun, like watching my couples have kids, and then I get to photograph them and like building relationships with them. And so that's just like a totally different thing than, you know, what comes along with journalism and news and sports. So I don't think I can pick.
There's
At
nothing
least
wrong
not
with
right
that.
now.
That's why my job's to frame them up. Your job is to knock them down. However we get to that point. So and this could be a little difficult. I will grant you in a conversation, but do the best you can with this. If I was to say, and you were to show me, this is a signature Ashley Green shot. What is a signature Ashley Green shot?
Oh man, I don't know. Probably something with my cats. I don't know. I really like for my couples and my wedding photography, I have a darker, like moody editing style that's completely different from just, you know, natural light, you know, journalism where everything is very straightforward and as you see it. So my wedding work is definitely a little more artsy and has more of its own style that hopefully if someone saw it, they would think of me or my work, I guess, more than just, you know, my journalism work that, not that it looks the same as everyone else, but has that like straightforward editing feel.
No question about that. If you were to think about your job, particularly in the world of photojournalism, and I think the wedding circuit plays this a little bit as well, because there's action. You are trying to define something, whether it's a game or a wedding or a news event, in a still image, which is incredibly difficult. And in a lot of cases, you know, if you're going to publish something in the paper, you're boiling it down to maybe a single photo. You've got to capture everything about this event in one photo. What are you looking for when you go back and you break everything down? What are you looking for to say, yep, that's it. That's the photo that tells this story?
Sure. I'm always looking for like that moment. So, you know, you get to a baseball game. In case you get called off to a fire or something, you get a pitcher shot, you get, you know, someone hitting, you maybe get a play at first base. You know, you get those like quick, easy shots but then you want to like wait it out for something hopefully a little more creative or fun. So maybe an interaction in the dugout or a fun celebration, or, you know, if there's like a fun lighting situation, a sunset or something like that. So something that's more of like a moment that stands out instead of just like that generic, you know, shot.
Baseball player throwing baseball.
Yeah, yeah,
There's got to be
exactly.
something more than that to
Right.
any one moment. When you're shooting, you know, there's that moment, and I think, you know, photographers who do this every day, you know, have this feeling. You know, you got it. You know, you guys have
Yeah.
a style and an ability and a way to know you got it. Is there a method? Do you know it the minute the shutter clicks? Or in some cases, is there a point and pray method here? Point, pray, take a spray, and hope you got it.
Yeah, it's a little of both, to be completely honest. I mean, you know, you get to, especially with sports, you teach yourself to like anticipate that moment, and you learn, you know, the different games and where the moment might come into play, and you try to prepare for that, but you never know what's actually going to happen. So, you know, you prepare and you hope that the thing you're planning for is going to play out, but it doesn't always. And, you know, we've all blown shots where you think you have like the perfect celebration and something's not in focus, or an umpire runs in front of you. I mean, there's a whole Twitter account like dedicated to missed photos. So yeah, it's a little of both for sure. Like you want to be planning and prepared, but also, you know, a lot of luck goes into it too. So
At the same time, you have to kind of let this play out, and you're going through that process, and then you do get it. You know, you do confirm it, and often, you know, I'll see you guys, you know, look down and you'll look, and you get that moment, you know, at a break in the action to see that you got the shot. Describe the feeling when you know you got it.
oh yeah, it's just so rewarding. Like when you know you have that big moment, especially with like high school sports or youth sports, you never want a parent to come up to you and be like, did you get it? Did you miss it? Like it's the pressure to make sure you got it is overwhelming sometimes, of course. But when you get that shot, like it's just, it feels so good. And you know, you get to, you know, share it with other people and they'll have that moment forever. It's just an awesome feeling to have.
Everyone has editors that they ultimately answer to in the world of journalism. You know, some sort of leadership that's obviously going to apply some of the critiques. So whether you go through and you are the print journalist who's writing the story, or the photojournalist illustrating the story, give us a little peek behind the scenes. When you go out and shoot something, is it that you're going to kind of give them maybe a handful of choices, they're going to make the ultimate decision, or do you get a little bit more editorial control to say, no, look, editor X, this is it. This is the shot that tells the story from the event. Here's what I got.
Yeah, again, it's a little bit of both. You know, I think they always want us to stand up for our images, and if we feel strongly about something, you know, make your opinion known that, you know, this is the image for me and I think this tells the story the best. But you know, there are also times where it's like, okay, well, this person's going to be at this thing, make sure you get a photo of them because they're mentioned in my story, or you know, whatever it may be. So it's definitely a mix for that too.
I will be the millionth person to make the reference, you know, that the media landscape is changing, but it is a fact. One need only spend any time in any aspect of this industry, and the landscape continues to change. And I would say over the last couple of months, while also going out there and doing your job, you know, both in the wedding photography world, less and less, obviously, as weddings happen, less and less at this moment in time. And then obviously, as a photojournalist, you've dealt with obviously the, you know, the events of what's been going on. You've also dealt within this COVID chaos with, of course, your career experience really epitomizing, I think, what is, you know, the changing landscape of print media. How would you tell the story of what has been career-wise your last couple of months, going from, you know, the initial furlough that I think, you know, in a lot of, you know, industry jobs people have taken because of there being less and less work maybe potentially to do, to then being told, you know, thanks so much for your time here, but we'll no longer need you or can't afford you any longer. And then all of a sudden you're back seemingly just a few days later. You know, I will say, as a fellow media member, my heart ached as I watched this play out on Twitter. But you did it in such a fantastically classy fashion to document what is reality in the media industry, and particularly in print journalism. How would you tell that story?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot. Without going too much into detail, you know, it's been a trying time. You know, we're not, a lot of newspaper advertising comes from events and businesses and all that. And with all of that on hold, obviously the newspaper industry is struggling across the country. There's been plenty of well-documented layoffs and furloughs and changes for everyone. And so, of course, we weren't we weren't left out of that, and we were affected too. And it's really hard to kind of, care a lot about your work and see those situations pull out. And I think we all, we all obviously care about our work a ton and the stories we tell and all of that. So it is really tough. I've had tons of friends in the past either be laid off or leave journalism because of how much it is changing all the time. And it's definitely hard. As far as weddings, I'm trying to go with the flow and make it as easy for my couples as possible. I feel terrible for everyone who has to reschedule and change all their plans. I've had a couple people who've decided to keep their date and elope, and I love that so much. I've kind of been encouraging everyone to do that. Party next year, wherever you can do it, and all your friends and family can be there. So yeah, in both departments, just trying to go with the flow and make it all keep happening.
Oh, no question about that. You were the beneficiary of a little bit of help from a fellow veteran Telegram and Gazette photographer. Steve Lanava, decided to take his retirement from the industry, well deserved at this time, and it certainly helped your scenario out, and ultimately led to your being returned to the Telegram and Gazette. I know you said a lot of great things about him out on social media, but just, of course, speak to obviously working with a veteran journalist like Steve, and obviously the number of years he served, and obviously the benefit of his retirement is you're getting to return to work where you belong.
Yeah, it of course makes for a pretty uncomfortable situation for me. I appreciate Steve so much. He's got to be one of the best sports photographers in our area. He has such a knack for finding those little moments that I talked about in a game where, he comes across with the money shot every time. And, it doesn't seem like he ever has those moments where he misses the photo or, it was out of focus. He gets it every time. So, we're, of course, already missing him and pretty bummed that he's not around. And hopefully he'll be doing some freelance work for us at some point. And, obviously we would love to have him around. So.
I had the opportunity a couple of years back to send a tweet to him. I was traveling for work, and there I was at the in Akron, Canton area. Went to the Professional Football Hall of Fame, and when you walked in their entryway, they were displaying photographs from across the country from print media photographers. And as I was walking along the wall and reading where the different photographers were from, there's a photo. I'm like, oh, Patriots photo. Okay, cool. Telegram and Gazette. Oh, that's interesting. Who shot that? Steve Lanava. I'm like, Steve was just in the press box with me 6 months ago covering high school football. Like, that's amazing. And it obviously speaks to, you can, from a very local, opportunity, find yourself in a really neat national, place. And his was, displayed in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I know, obviously, for us with smaller staffs, some of those national media outlet opportunities aren't always there, or, Patriots, Red Sox games. Some of that isn't really possible for us anymore, but Steve's done some crazy cool things. He could tell you so many stories. I want to say he photographed Yaz's last game.
Wow.
At Fenway, I think. I'll have to double check on that. But yeah, he's seen some awesome things, and just being able to look back, I would love if he, put some sort of like digital portfolio together, because it would just be awesome to see what he's done through the years, and, with sports especially.
No question about that. And of course, you mentioned the merging operations. That's part of the changing print landscape. And just recently here over the last, handful of months as well, the Telegram has modified its leadership and taken, the managing editor of the Telegram and appointed them over a couple of your sister papers as well, and further merging those operations. How will that change, obviously, the Telegram and Gazette's newsroom, and how that obviously affects other forms of operation as well?
Sure. on a day-to-day basis, I think I have a photography editor that I report to, and that's kind of my main contact point, I guess, especially right now where we're not really working in a physical newsroom. So, I think we're just going to keep trying to put out good work and do the best we can. And, everyone's still willing to just work hard every day, basically. So.
I want to steer you back to the wedding circuit again for a bit, because I told you before we got started here today that while I have a tremendous respect for photographers, and Kate and I had a fantastic photographer, I can't say enough good things about it. We conducted interviews. We really found somebody who, you know, we trusted and that we enjoyed. At the same time, being on your end of this business, I would put you right next to brain surgeons and combat pilots landing at night on a carrier, because I don't know if in my mind there's a more difficult job in this industry than shooting somebody's wedding. I mean, this is like for most people, we're going to qualify, for most people, the one time they're going to get married and the one day that they've got these memories, you're entrusted with capturing them. What's that like?
Yeah, it does get overwhelming at times for sure. I never really pictured myself doing weddings at first. I was kind of like terrified of it, and I didn't really want to even have that pressure you talk about of, you know, capturing that one moment in that one day. And it kind of started just word of mouth, you know, oh, I take photos of families. Okay, well, she can do weddings too. And I was like, no, I can't. But obviously, you know, year by year, it just kind of grows more and more. And it started with just, you know, one small wedding for a family friend. And just kind of totally took off from there. It is overwhelming, but it's so fun. I mean, to go to parties and, you know, weddings and get to be part of that all the time, and, you know, people let you in on like some of the most intimate moments in their lives, and that's just so cool that people trust me, I think, to, you know, capture that for them, and let me be part of their day. And it's just very cool that I get to do that.
As you look back over your experiences in shooting weddings on this circuit, give me an amazing story. Give me a good, positive story that stands out from your experience. Something you really enjoyed, something you'll never forget.
Sure. Oh, there's so much. I really just I love the little moments, because I don't always know like all of the family members and the interactions and all of that. But, you know, there's always like moments where, you know, grandma's out dancing with the bride or something like that. And that moment just feels so special to me. And I love like those little moments that you find. You know, wedding days are so big and there's so much to them. Um, but those little moments that like you get to see, and, you know, sometimes a first look with a bride and her dad, like that's just always such a sweet moment. And I love seeing the dads like just totally lose it and break down. Like they think they're going to be fine and they're never fine.
Note to
Or the,
self,
you know, the
dads
groom
out
that,
there, you're never fine.
yeah. Or, you know, the groom that thinks he's going to be too cool to cry and then he totally loses it and breaks down. Like, I just love that stuff and like all the emotion that goes into wedding days. Yeah. It's the best though. That's the best. That's the best part. My favorite, I always tell my brides, my favorite part of the day is when the groom first sees the bride. And that could be during a first look ahead of time or walking down the aisle. But it's like the best moment. Everyone turns around to see the bride, but I love watching the groom and seeing like his reaction and just completely being overwhelmed. And, you know, the moment they like lock eyes, like that stuff is just so fun. And seeing all that, those little moments play out.
It's the stuff that's not on the pre-planned shot sheet, which
Yeah,
is always
exactly.
a lot of fun in those moments. Of course, this comes on the other side. I'm going to frame it as horror stories, but we'll frame it this way: a funny story. There's got to be something funny that's happened in shooting these days as well.
Oh my gosh, so much. I feel like some photographers get really, I don't want to say bored, but the reception, you know, we love the creative like couples portraits and the fun sunset stuff. And I kind of love like receptions once everyone's, you know, had a beverage and they're a little more relaxed and not worrying about how they act so much and they just let loose. Like I love seeing like, you know, dads out on the dance floor. They're like breaking it down. Their kids have never seen them dance before in their lives. Like I love that stuff. And oh man, I'm gonna think of so many funny stories after this. But yeah, there's just always so much like dancing and on the dance floor and moments like that that are hilarious. I had a couple this past February. Actually, they pretty much got their wedding in like right before all of this. And the groom broke his leg in a skiing accident like months before, like I think weeks before the wedding. And he was such a trooper on the wedding day. He was on the dance floor all night. He had a huge cast, had his friends, instead of crutches, because you know crutches aren't super like photogenic, his friends made him a sword cane, and it was like a cane with this big huge, like, you pull the sword out, and it just made for the most photos. And he was on the dance floor all night just breaking it down, and I was so impressed. And he probably could move the next day after all that, but like for one night to have your fun party and be able to get through it, like I was laughing at him so hard all night, because every time I turn around he'd be breaking it down, and I'm like, how are you even moving or standing right now?
Back to the landing on an aircraft carrier for a moment. When I think about this wedding circuit, this is what I think about for your job, especially as more and more people carry their smartphones with them. We'll call this person Aunt Mabel, the family photographer, the one that, you know, shoots every birthday and everything, and, you know, gets it, this photo here, it's a beauty. And there you are about to have this intimate moment that you're like, oh, here comes the shot for the cover of the gallery, and there's Aunt Mabel's behind. How many butt shots are there in the what doesn't make the gallery? And how about a PSA for folks staying out of the way of the person who got paid to be there?
Yeah, probably more than butt shots is cell phone shots.
Yep.
Which now, you know, I'm guilty of it too. I have my phone with me all the time. If I don't have my camera, I'm taking pictures of everything on my phone. But really on a wedding day, like I really want people to be present. Like I know mom wants to get that photo, but more than that, you're going to have my photos. So just enjoy the moment and, like, you know, have those emotional feelings that are genuine, that you're watching, you know, with your eyes instead of through a phone screen. And I've only really worked weddings since it's been like that. So I never knew it, you know, without cell phones everywhere. And I try my best to, you know, get the shot without phones in it, or, you know, at least get a cropped version where you see less of that. And I'm pretty lucky. I haven't had like big moments completely ruined by someone stepping in. But, you know, I have had like a dad in the aisle, you know, with his cell phone next to me. And I always try to be as kind as possible, because my job is important, but I'm also not going to be like rude to people. And it's a very, you know, delicate balance, obviously. But I've learned to speak up a little bit and just, you know, can you please move back a little, or whatever it may be. But yeah, I'm just always trying to encourage people to just, you know, live in the moment of the day. It goes by so quickly.
There will be plenty of Instagram photos available from Ashby.
Exactly. Like you're going to get every photo I take, and I promise they'll be better than your cell phone.
No question about that. When you think about, of course, a wedding day, you know, how many, I can only imagine what it's like looking at the card at the end of the day. How many do you actually shoot? How many photos do you actually shoot versus what the client ends up with at the end?
Sure. I mean, it all depends on the length of the day.
Sure.
I've had some weddings that have lasted, you know, 5-6 hours, or smaller elopements that are an hour or two, to then, you know, on the opposite spectrum, like 12-hour days. So obviously that's going to depend how many photos you get back. And, you know, I try to give as many as possible, because who am I to judge what moment is more important than the one next to it? So I shoot pretty heavy and I deliver pretty heavy. So, you know, if I'm shooting, I don't know, maybe 6,000 photos in a long day, they'll probably get back close to, I think the most I've ever given is like 1,500. So you're still getting a lot of photos back. And
Absolutely.
it's, but you know, you don't want the photo. You know, people always say, can I have all my photos? It's like, no, I promise I'm going to give you the most flattering ones. So you don't want those other ones. They're not going to be good anyways. You don't need them.
I promise you don't need to clutter up your computer with those.
Exactly.
I hear that. All right, I promised you we would play this game because I am totally fascinated by this. So this is where I go nerd on this segment. We're going to play the what's in the bag. So, you know, photographers, broadcasters of any type, you walk out there, you've got your bag. You guys probably more than most have so many things. You know, when I look at a sideline of a sporting event or whatever, you know, you've got, you know, a smaller one, you got a long lens, you've got them going every which way but loose across your body. So tell me, what's in your basic shot kit when you go out and shoot again?
Sure. So I don't typically use a backpack, but since all this has been going on, and I find that I put my bag down at assignments pretty often. And since I was feeling so kind of like germy with the world, I've started using a backpack, which just helps a lot. I have my laptop in there now. I've got hand sanitizer right on the top here. I've got, yep. We've got a card reader, some backup batteries. We've got a laptop charger. Typically I have my bags kind of unpacked for the weekend, so it's a little looser here than normal. I've got my 70-200 lens, and that is on my D750, which I only shoot Nikon. I have another card reader in here because I've definitely been at assignments and not had one, which is never fun. I have a 50mm lens in here. I have an 85, I have a 20, and then I have my Nikon Z6, which is a little bit newer of a camera, and I have a 35mm lens on there. So I travel, I think, relatively light. Some people always make comments like, oh, your bag weighs more than you, which is probably true sometimes. But compared to like some other photographers, I try to travel as light as possible. And then I have my wedding bag over here, which typically would have all of that same stuff. And
but
then
in a
I
much
have
more
other
stylish
stuff.
package, for the record.
Yes, much more stylish for weddings. I've got backup batteries. I would typically have a flash in here. More batteries, always more batteries. I've got a case for cards. I have business cards.
Ah, yes.
Which are, you know, kind of going out of date now. And then I have this kind of goodie bag that I bring for all my brides, and especially bridesmaids. And it has little toothbrushes. It has Tide to Go. We've got makeup wipes. We've got tiny scissors, gum, floss, mints, Band-Aids, a sewing kit, bobby pins, Advil. We've kind of got it all in here.
The essential wedding kit. See, what's my bag has already paid off. Like that in and of itself, you gotta have.
I found myself needing some of these things on wedding days. And so I was like, if I need these things, someone who has nothing with them all day but a cell phone probably needs these things. And it comes in super handy. I mean, even for me, you know, I need Advil a lot of times by the end of a wedding day. So the other thing we have in here that's fun is, I don't even know what this is called. It's like the sticky putty that you can pull off a little piece. And I use it for detail ring shots, which is like a trick. So yeah, I'll put a little bit of this on the rings, and then I can make them stand up on whatever I want, invitations or flowers or anything like that. And then get those like fun detail shots that no one ever knows how I managed to get. And the other fun thing I have in here is sparklers. I'm always trying to convince my couples to do sparkler shots at the end of the night, which makes for something kind of fun. And it's always a fun, like, thank you card type photo. So I get super excited when my couples want to do that at the end. So yeah, not typical stuff you would think would be in my bag. That's probably the weirdest thing I have in here.
Nothing wrong with that, indeed. You know, I think the other thing that people maybe, you know, underestimate, if you will, is, you know, the balance between, and you mentioned this as well, you will sometimes pull out your cell phone and fire off a shot, and we're all more and more as these cell phone, you know, cameras get better and better and better, are carrying a very powerful tool as well, whether you're shooting a wedding or whether you're shooting a, you know, something for your day job as a photojournalist. Do you find yourself trying to balance those two? I mean, obviously the cameras that you're carrying and the bodies that you're looking at for the uninitiated are far superior to anything that you're carrying around on your cell phone. But the cell phone's not half bad if you're in a pinch.
Yeah, for sure. I hate to admit this because, you know, I'm pro having photojournalists at your papers, but obviously we have cell phone shots run online and run in print. You know, if I ever either had an issue with my camera or didn't have my camera, I always have my phone on me. So I'm always going to have that camera back in my pocket, which is just an awesome technology to have. And of course, my first choice would always be my camera. But, you know, even right now where we weren't really leaving our homes for photo shoots and stuff like that, I did a couple FaceTime sessions, which became like trendy in the photography world, where we were literally like FaceTiming people, and I would take basically photos of my camera transmitting to theirs, and you know, it's better than no photo shoot right now. And my best friend gave birth at St. B's through all of this, and I was able to take some photos of her and her baby like in hospital that, you know, at least it's better than her trying to take a selfie. It's not, you're not going to hang it on the wall poster size, but you know, it's better than nothing. And, you know, just trying to innovate and do whatever we could. And it was challenging, but super fun to like be able to create in a different way that challenged us and kind of let go of like the perfection of shooting and the perfect exposure and all that. And just kind of like capturing some fun moments and then, you know, editing from there and picking some cute stuff.
I do this quite often. I got to ask, there's got to be a pro tip that you have. And I do this with my students. I'll incessantly hound them when we talk about using your cell phone, you know, about like shooting horizontally, because it only makes logical sense. You've never met a TV screen that looks like this.
For sure.
There's not one in your home. So you got to do this, right? You know, so I'm always after them, you know, about that. If you were going to give, you know, a pro tip to Aunt Mabel, the family photographer, tell me what is the pro tip? You know, if I wanted a better photo, what do I got to do to get it?
Sure. So first of all, don't use a flash unless you need one. If you're indoors and your photo is going to be dark or blurry, then use your flash. But otherwise, don't use it because you don't need it, and it's going to throw off the color a little bit and all that fun stuff. But, you know, Apple has these tools that we can use. So, you know, if you press down on the screen of your photo, you can focus it and you can choose which object you want to be in focus. You can brighten and darken exposure that way. And phones just keep getting smarter and smarter. There's so many editing apps you can download, camera apps you can download that have fun effects. There's just so much. So if you just take the time to kind of play around with it, like the same thing you said, like horizontal and vertical. I'm like, if I'm going to post something on Twitter, I'm like, okay, I'm going to definitely shoot it horizontal because that platform shows it the best. But if I want to put something on my Instagram story, I'm like, okay, I'm going to shoot it vertical because that's what Instagram stories look like. So just kind of, I don't know. I mean, my brain works different than other people. So I'm always like shooting for the platform I want to show it off on. But yeah, I mean, just play around with it and learn the tools you have.
Your brain's no different than everyone else's. Your brain is that of a media professional, which is why it drives me ballistic when people shoot video like this and put on a TV screen that looks like this.
It's tough. Well, you've got kids now, everyone's obsessed with TikTok, and TikTok's a vertical platform. So people, you know, younger kids, they're picking up their phone, they're taking that vertical video because that's what they're used to seeing.
You mentioned all of the things, you know, that are out there that apps can do. And so I'm gonna actually look for a pet peeve of yours in this industry. I'll tell you, for me, the pet peeve, you know, in that industry, you know, of radio and TV is when somebody says to me, you know, can we do a lip dub? Okay, as soon as the words lip dub cross their lips, I'm immediately going, that's like asking a comedian to tell you a bunch of knock-knock jokes for the next hour. Do you understand how much more thought goes into a talk show or a game show or what have you? You see, I've had this conversation recently. It's going to turn into a therapy session. What is the knock joke of photography? Would you look at him and go, really? You think that looks good? Really?
One thing that gets to me for sure is, you know, you can take screenshots of your phone, obviously, but you can also, from most apps, just hold the photo down to your phone. And I often see people, even sometimes when I send out my galleries, they'll take a screenshot and then it has all the words all over the phone, but they'll post the photo with like the Instagram hearts and the caption or, you know, the rest, the information from the email, and they'll post that like online. And I'm like, but you could have just saved just the picture. So that drives me a little nuts. And I hate to see, like an Instagram filter on a photo that I've like put work into to edit and make it look its best in my eyes. Because, you know, if you put your Instagram filter, it's like you didn't think that I did it good enough, so you wanted to do it better. Stuff like that. I mean, oh God, I could come up with so many more.
Certainly. Like I said, it could end up being a media therapy session.
Oh, for sure.
Somewhere along the way. Before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about where we hope we're going with 2020 and 2021 school year, which is, you know, not that far away given what we're looking at. But before I get there, let's talk a little bit about, under, again, normal circumstances. You know, I know Kate and you know, commiserate about this quite often. You are both one of few females that are on a routinely male-dominated sports beat. What is it like being one of few female photographers that's out there shooting sports?
Um, I'm not gonna lie, it's hard sometimes. I'm really lucky, another female photographer in our newsroom, Christine Peterson. So we get to, you know, push those complaints off each other and commiserate a little sometimes. I hate to ever be like, oh, poor me, I'm all alone. But for sure, it's hard sometimes. I mean, we've had, you know, men get access to locker rooms and stuff like that occasionally that I would just obviously never have access to. So it does limit you physically in times like that. Obviously, if we were covering a female game, I could go into a female locker room. But yeah, it's hard. Obviously, in my case, I do look a little younger, and I often get asked if I'm a student or if I work for the school paper or if I'm shooting for the yearbook. And that always gets under my skin for sure. And I'm sure as I get older, I'll like those comments everyone tells me. But you know, right now it's hard because I want to be respected and I want people to know that I'm a grown up and I belong here and I've worked to be here. And so it's hard. And you know, I have another female sports reporter that I work with, Jen Toland, and she's just great. She's awesome. And you know, it's nice having like those female voices to learn from and, you know, learn about their experiences too, and not, you know, feel so alone sometimes.
Some of your best promoters or some of your colleagues that are, yes, men, but they you've worked with in the sports departments, and I can think of a number of them off the top of my head that are always talking about how fantastic you are. It seems like you have this great collection of brothers, a really large family of brothers from multiple sports departments.
Yeah, that's really nice of you to say. Definitely in Fitchburg, I have relationships with Nick Mallard and Chad Garner, and I'm sure they're both gonna be on me on Twitter about this and be laughing at me.
Chad was episode number 1 in the series. You can go back and look at it.
Oh, good. So I'll watch his and then make fun of him back. No, but it's really nice still having relationships with those guys, despite, you know, not working with them. And Ross Edwards, the sports editor there, was just always great for me. I had a really good relationship with him. I actually ended up shooting his wedding, which was fun. Um, so it's nice having those relationships. And then obviously everyone in Worcester is just awesome too. You know, they don't treat me like I'm a girl and I don't know anything, which makes me feel good. And, you know, they trust me sending me to places. You know, Jim Wilson's asked me to make sure I come back with like this outrageous, you know, hockey photo, and it better be, you know, Pulitzer Prize winning and all that. And it's nice having like, you know, jokey relationships with all of them and feeling comfortable. So
being able to be a part of the team for sure. And we know some point, somewhere in the future, we will return to athletics the way we all knew them. The question will become, how soon and what are the steps along the way. When you return to whatever the next step is, what are you expecting, in the athletic environment that you're used to shooting in, and how are you expecting maybe it to be different?
yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the thing right now is no one knows what to expect. Even I know Fitchburg High is doing their class relays this week, which is one of usually my favorite events during the course of the year. I just, you know, growing up here, I just love being at Crocker Field and just doing something that has so much tradition. And they're totally doing it different this year. They're making sure it happens, but you know, it's not going to be your typical class relays where Crocker Field is packed with fans and packed with students. And I think we're going to see a lot of that going forward, even with professional sports. You know, it's going to be creepy someday if we see a Fenway Park with no fans in it and, you know, just however many players on the field and a couple coaches. I think it's going to be crazy. I would love to see sports back. But, you know, there's been a lot of controversy about how you ask these players to put aside, you know, maybe their own family or their own health, and how that's all going to play out. And, you know, selfishly, of course, I would love to be at Fenway this summer and be watching the Red Sox every night, but I just don't know how you make it happen until we get further along the road with this and really see how it's going to all play out more than just the 2 or 3 months we've been in right now.
No question about that. I'll leave you with this last question, Ashley. When you think about obviously what we had talked about in kind of this full, kind of travel when it comes to, the print media industry and your job specifically, how important, obviously, is the world of sports returning to the local newspaper business?
Oh, it's huge. You know, page views are huge for us right now. You know, a lot of times like that mom or dad is still going to the store to buy the paper in the morning because their kid is in it. Sports coverage is huge for us. And, you know, especially those of us that work at night, it's a lot of what we do. And I feel awful for these kids losing their seasons, especially the seniors. It's just so hard, you know, not being able to play that last season or that last playoff game or whatever it may be. And obviously, you know, we didn't have a sports season at all in spring. So just not getting those last moments, I feel awful for those kids. And, you know, personally, obviously I love shooting sports, so I definitely want them back as soon as possible.
As soon as possible and as soon as safe. Ashley Green, Worcester Telegram and Gazette photojournalist and photographer. Thank you so much for joining us here on Press Row.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Where can I find you online? I mean, we may as well do a little business promotion while we're here.
Sure.
Where can I find you online?
So you can find me on Instagram's probably my number one, and Twitter. Instagram is Ashley Green Photography. Twitter is A Green Photog. My business Facebook page is facebook.com/Ashley Green Photo. I have to type these all the time, but keeping them all straight in my head is a lot. So yeah, those are probably my top three. And then my website is just ashleygreenphoto.com.
Fantastic. Ashley Green, thank you again so much for joining us here on Press Row. Like, subscribe, and more to Ashley Green Photo and all of the items you see on your screen. We thank you so much for being a part of another edition of Press Row here on Rivalry Family Media and being a part of our family. For Ashley Green, I am Todd Robbins saying thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, so long, everybody.